We are tackling racism on Sky Sports News. Tonight, we focus on women. Is there enough BAME representation among those playing football, sitting in our boardrooms and working in our newsrooms? Joining our panel this evening, we've got Rupinder Baines, the FA Director, Simone Pound, the PFA's Head of Equalities, Chelsea and England player Anita Asante, and ESPN correspondent Melissa Reddy. And we want you to get in touch on Twitter using the hashtag Tackling Racism. We want your views and your questions, and we'll answer some of them live on Twitter after the show. Well, we're going to start with some, quite frankly, worrying statistics. Kick It Out's 2018 and 19 research into discrimination in professional and grassroots football in the men's and women's game shows a rise of 32% in incidents reported. That's compared to the previous year. Now, their report shows there have been 422 reports of discrimination in the professional and grassroots games, and that's up from 319 the previous year. Incidents of racism continue to rise. It remains the most common form of discrimination in both professional and grassroots football, making up 65% of reports. That is a 43% rise from 2017 to 18. And the latest Kick It Out figures mean that it's now the 7th consecutive year that reports of discrimination have increased. So what is behind the rises?
We've seen it on the international level last season. We've seen it, some very high-profile incidents in our game last year at the highest level. And we've got to make sure that we marry the kind of sanctions that happen at the top level of the game right across the board. So we're sending out a message that, you know, no longer is this stuff acceptable in our football arenas and on our grassroots pitches. People
are more confident about reporting, but I think there just is more hate crime, and that shows in Home Office statistics as well as ours. There just is a rise in it, and whatever that reason, people can argue post-Brexit, whatever that is, I think we would say in football, yes, we see a rise in it, definitely.
Ultimately, we've been speaking about this here at Kick It Out, harsher sanctions, mandatory education, and an approach that sees all of the governing bodies working together, which we are, but clearly we need to do more because the incidents are nothing that people want to see.
Now, it wasn't just the men's game with high-profile incidents last season. In March 2019, Sheffield United forward Sophie Jones was found guilty of racially abusing Renee Hector of Tottenham Hotspur Women. She was banned for 5 matches and sacked by her club. Now, we'll come to our panel now. Rupinder, starting with you. You sit on the FA board. These are concerning figures, aren't they? The Kick It Out ones that we just saw. How do we make sure that incidents like these, that we just spoke about, Renee Hector, is a one-off in the women's game?
I think it certainly is very, very concerning with the figures that have been released. I think a lot of it probably has to do with the fact that more people are reporting these instances. It's becoming more familiar to bring this to your club's attention, to make a complaint wherever possible. However, what we're doing at the FA now is to stamp on these issues and to charge every issue that comes to our attention. We're taking a very firm line, and we're even looking at, tightening up all the policies that we have at the moment. Things are coming under scrutiny, and we are acting on things to make sure things don't happen time and time again.
Anita, I'll come to you. As a player, I mean, you've been in the game a long time, more than 70 caps for England, Team GB. Do these stats concern you as a player?
Yeah, of course, it's something we don't want in the game at all. If we can eradicate that as soon as possible, then that would be great for everyone. For the future generations coming into the game, we want them to feel that they can come into this space and feel safe. But like I've said before, it's very rare that these incidences occur in the women's game. And that's actually something we're quite proud of in the women's football, is that we don't have so many cases of racial abuse or discrimination. But of course, we can continue to improve that moving forward.
Simone, you work for the PFA. Are females players coming to you for advice on how to tackle racism?
Obviously, at the PFA, we're there to represent and support the players, and we're very strong advocates of the women's game per se. We have represented players who have come to us with issues of discrimination, and we will be there if anyone needs us going forward.
And do you encourage players to speak out about any incidents that might happen?
Yeah, it's really important, and I think one of the factors of the reporting incidents stats being so high is because We've worked really hard as a game to ensure that people know how to report and are confident in reporting, and I think that's a really important part of the work that we do in the men's and women's game.
And Melissa, what about the media's role in all of this? Is it their job to challenge this?
Absolutely. I think the rise in reporting of the incidents means that the media can no longer shy away of covering these issues. We've definitely seen the media tackle a lot more sensitive subjects with a lot more vigour and a lot more intensity, which is what we need. I think now the next step is to ensure there's diversification in newsrooms so people don't just report, but they understand what the people are going through, the victims of these incidents.
OK. Now, out of England's 23 World Cup players this summer, only 8.7% had a BAME background. The men last summer had 44%. So, is there an issue with representation of BAME players in the women's game? Well, we spoke to former England international Leanne Sanderson.
I think it starts from a long time ago. You know, I think these racial biases have been in the game for a long time, and I think now that we're having these interviews like now talking about it, you know, there's a lot more talk about equality, you know, diversity, sexuality, race and stuff like that. I think it's great that there's now more visibility about it. Players like myself will always bring awareness to these situations. You know, they've got the blacklist now that Leon Mann runs, which is a fantastic thing. And when people say to me, you know, if we had this is what people genuinely sometimes say, what about if we had a whitelist? And I'm like, you don't get the point. You know, it's the same as why we have pride, like why we have gay pride, because we have to celebrate who we are, because we're not able to do that on a day-to-day basis, and I don't think people realise that. At the end of the day, the players can't pick themselves, you know, same as coaches. Coaches can't pick themselves to go on courses, you know. At St George's Park, they have the coaching courses and stuff like that, but you have to get selected to go. So, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of, like, ethnic backgrounds, ethnic minorities, black people, white people, Asian people, whatever you may, like, do. There's a lot of people out there that would love to do it, but they don't feel like they're going to get the opportunity. And my advice to those people is please do put yourself forward.
Now, Fadumo Olo hosts the I Think She Is Offside podcast. She followed England throughout this summer's World Cup, vlogging her experiences. So what does she make of the makeup of the national team?
I think there is a lack of diversity in football, in women's football as a whole anyway, and I don't think it's, when you look at the England team, it's not representative of women across the country as it is. Like, yes, we can talk about, oh my God, you know, we've got Nikita Paris, we've got Demi Stokes, and we do, but even then, it's not nearly as representative as the men's team is.
Does a lack of representation affect the grassroots game? Well, we went to meet East London Ladies FC. They've recently celebrated their 10th anniversary as a club. It's exclusively for female players and run by 2 BAME women. We caught up with them.
I've got only 3 black girls on the team and I've got a squad of 30-something, do you know what I mean? And for me, I find it quite interesting that sometimes I'm like, yes, we need more BAME, and then I look at my club and I'm like, oh, I've only got about 3 or 4. So I also have to look at what I can do to encourage them to come along and to encourage them to come and play. And that's something that I'm trying to work on and trying to figure out within myself what I can do more to get the word out there and try and get them more involved. But I just feel like the representation of black female coaches ain't enough, and we need to boost it a little bit more.
I would say if you actually look at the England team, if you looked at the England team that just went, there was 2 girls that were BME. So I think that has an influence as well. If the girls are watching on TV, actually there's not that many, it might discourage them that actually there's not that many girls like me that are playing. So I think as the FA, they need to promote something and, you know, have more people included, or have, I don't know, show training sessions with more BME.
So just going back to those World Cup stats, only 8.7% of the women BAME background compared with 44% of the men. Why is the figure so much lower for women? Rupinder, I'll come to you first.
I think it's a combination of factors. One of the most important issues being that we as a community need to come together a bit more and understand the nature of the sport. And I think if organisations across the board come together and present the programmes that we've got in place now. The FA is doing a great initiative with In Pursuit of Progress. They're going out with the Asian Inclusion Plan now and trying to teach people that you have got job opportunities, not just playing football, but as coaches, as in the professional side of the game. There's so many more opportunities. Role models are coming out now, and we're using those to try and entice more people from the BMA background to come forward and take up positions.
Yeah, Anita, do you think that people, young people from BAME backgrounds, women in particular, they don't think that it's a viable career going forward, or that it's not for them?
Yeah, I think it's obviously looking within our own communities and addressing those issues and saying, you know, there's so many opportunities for girls to involve themselves in football, but also in education. You can do both at the same time. You know, that's kind of been my path, and breaking down these gender norms that we've had. I think it was accepted that boys could play football because there was a viable career and a profession, and now with the growth of the sport and more visibility, that will start to change, because people can see there are actually jobs, not just as players, but within the industry as a whole.
What do you think are some of the obstacles that are facing ethnic minority women? Simone?
I think it's a really multifaceted question, and I think obviously we have got a significant underrepresentation of BAME female players playing across the board. I think when you look at RTCs and where they're based, we could look at working to ensure that players who are from more urban areas are more able to be more accessible to those RTCs. I think one of the rules is that you have to live within 90 minutes of an RTC, whereas they are actually based in very suburban areas. So I think that's one very proactive thing that we can do. I also think in terms of role models and visibility, and like we've kind of said previously, it's really important that we have across the board, not just playing, but in coaching, managing, administration and board levels.
Yeah, we've got loads more coming up actually on role models. I just wanted to come to you, Melissa, to talk about the double barrier of sexism and racism and how you think, you know, to deal with that.
Definitely. I think you see it a lot of times when you're reporting a piece of information that people maybe don't want to see. So, for example, if you are very hopeful that your club is signing player A, and I've got information that the club is not signing that person and I've got to put it out, the feedback I get is not only of a what does she know, the she aspect of it, but it's always with racial connotations as well. I think there's that sense of it, but also when you're breaking through and you speak about why there's an underrepresentation of females in the game, but this will be across the board, is because it's very difficult to convince yourself to get into an industry where you don't see people that look like you, or where there's very few people that look like you doing this thing that you want to go and do. You don't feel that it's possible. I think it's so important to have... I spoke to Nikita Paris recently, and what she's done is set up an academy in Toxteth, her hometown. And she said she did that because she wanted little girls to know that they can be where she is, and here's a pathway. Here, you know, here's an academy. You can get education, you can get the training, not just playing-wise, but in terms of coaching and all that. The facilities are there. So I think knowing that something's possible by actually seeing it in action is a very powerful tool.
Yeah, and how was it for you as a player? Because you started very young, started playing in the cages, just wanting to play football, and then you started your career quite young as well. But as a teenager, dealing with that double barrier, sexism and racism, how was that for you growing up?
Yeah, I think it was difficult because I didn't see football as a career path initially. That wasn't my end goal. And I was very fortunate to just have very supportive parents, and luckily in an education system that also supported what I wanted to do. That's both, you know, at secondary level and at university. And I think if I didn't have that, I don't know if I would have got as far as I have. Because as Simone mentioned before, you know, until we reach out to more urban communities where there are, you know, multifaceted people that can get involved in the sport, we won't get that diversification. It just simply won't happen, because it's very difficult for parents who maybe have more than one child, and also working parents to, you know, get their kids out to these facilities that are based out in rural areas and suburbs. So that's one area that we really, I think, need to improve.
I think the game has a real responsibility, and like Melissa said, players going and working with communities and working within their club community schemes is a real opportunity for young people to see players out and about and representing.
Yeah, and on the issue of having supportive families, supportive parents, we talked about this, didn't we, before the show, and it's quite a big issue within the Asian community, wouldn't you say?
I think it definitely is an issue. I know myself with my own children and their sports backgrounds, you know, when it comes to a choice as to whether it's education first or sports, I myself push sports forward, and it's only when I'm now working within the organisation myself and seeing the opportunities that are there, we're gearing forward now for the next generation. We want to make it clear to them that you are going to be supported, there are opportunities for you. At the FA, we see ourselves as being socially responsible, and in that format we are taking, for example, the women's game and elevating it. So we're putting money into it, we're supporting the women's game by means of creating pathways, strategy, etc. And hopefully that will elevate the position of women in society as well, seeing how women are capable of playing such a fantastic sport and working at higher levels.
Yeah, OK, thanks, Rupinder. Lots more to come, and on the way we explore role models in women's football. Just how much can the sport learn from the likes of Serena Williams? Welcome back to Tackling Racism. It's our special on women. We really want you to get in touch on Twitter. Use the hashtag Tackling Racism. We want your views and questions, and we will answer some of them live on Twitter after the show. Now, last season, Raheem Sterling's stance against racism in the men's game drew widespread praise for him standing up as a role model and encouraging people to speak out. Is there anyone who can adopt a similar position in the women's game?
In the UK, it's very hard for athletes to open up and speak up because of the backlash they would have. We know before Raheem Sterling became an activist footballer, you know, he couldn't speak up, you know, because he would be attacked. But for a female who already gets underpaid for playing sports to then stand up and say, actually, I disagree with this, imagine the backlash they would have. I mean, you only have to look at the US team, look at Megan Rapinoe's kind of backlash of, oh, she thinks she's, you know, she's so arrogant, she's cocky. No, she's not. She's a woman that's worked really hard to be where she is, and she's achieved all those things, so she's allowed to celebrate. Now, if we had a Serena Williams of the UK, I mean, we do have one, in fact. Eniola, we have Eni. Look at what it took Eni to speak up, and when she spoke up the first time, the backlash was hard. It was really hard on her, and to have her go through all of that and then in the end find out that she was actually telling the truth. Imagine all the other women that sat back and said, I can't believe she's done that, to, oh my God, I can't believe she's gone through that. You know, any woman in sports would be scared to speak up. But I think we need to create an environment that is okay for women to speak up and not feel that they would be attacked under those conditions.
Melissa, let's come to you first. How important are role models for representation in the women's game and improving it?
As I said before, I think it's so important to see people that you can relate to. But I also think that when they get into those positions, you need to be able to be responsible with it and use it to make a change, whether that is speaking up like Raheem Sterling has done, or fighting your corner like Eni did, which, you know, drew a lot of criticism at the time, and she received a lot of unfair backlash, but she was strong enough to take that position. That shows courage, and it would encourage, you know, people down the line will think, if she was brave enough to do it, I probably also have it in me to do it, and I should do it. So I think having the people that, like I said, that you can relate to is so important, but it's even more powerful when you see that these people that you relate to are showing strength that you can then feed off as well.
Yeah, and we spoke about Eni Aluko there in that VT. You supported her when she came out with her comments. What she did, do you think that will encourage people to speak out? Will they have faith in the system?
Yeah, hopefully, because, you know, she saw it out through to the end, and she stood by her words and showed conviction, and that showed that, you know, you could believe exactly what she said and what happened to her. It was the truth, and fundamentally that's all that matters. So hopefully there will be people that don't have to go through that, obviously, but if they do, they'll have the same courage to see it through and to voice up their opinions. But I think more importantly, it shouldn't always be the victim that has to come out and stand up for themselves or the issue, especially if there are other people around that have witnessed it or, you know, are involved in that situation. We also want to see more allies that can support that person when they're in their time of need, like we would any of our colleagues, any of our friends, our family members, in the same way.
To see change, we need people who are not the victims, you know, the people who are witnessing, like you say, to call out this kind of behaviour, whether it be in a group chat, in a face-to-face situation, at work. Would you say that that's fair?
No, I do. I wasn't obviously at the FA when the Eni Aluko matters came to a head, but I can say that the organisation as a whole has really changed. They've learnt a lot from that whole incident and are moving forward. I personally wouldn't be at the FA right now if I didn't believe in that. But going back to role models and how important they are, I think they're two-pronged. I think it's very important for future players to have role models that they aspire to, but also for their families to see that this is possible and to see people following a certain career path, and that is possible for their children to follow in those footprints as well.
What about Serena Williams? We mentioned her before the break and what she's achieved in sport. What do you think can be learned from her influence? Simone?
I think Serena's a fantastic role model, and also Gabby, the young female player who came through at Wimbledon.
Coco.
Yes, exactly. She was, you know, so inspirational, and I think we can learn a lot from those very visible black female role models as a sport.
The thing with Serena, though, is she's shown that she's got such thick skin. She is the greatest female tennis player ever, and still constantly gets questioned, still, you know, gets told she's either too masculine, too masculine, too arrogant, too this, too that. She is the best at what she does. She doesn't let anyone deter her from her mission. And I always tell young females, ask me so often, what does it take to get into this industry? And I say you have to be exceptionally, exceptionally good, set yourself apart, but also you have to be so strong and so thick-skinned, because it's not nice all the time. It's a lovely working environment if you're passionate about it, and obviously you get to be connected to the game, but there's a lot of stuff that comes with it, and you have to sort of pick your shoulders up, take everything on, and how you knock everything they say about you back is by continuing being good. And for me, that's what Serena stands for.
And is that what you, in your experiences, have dealt with and overcome?
Yeah, you deal with it every day as a female in football. It's even more so when you're a woman of colour in football, because you have that. I'm foreign as well. I'm not born in England, so I'm like a triple threat. But yeah, you do get people sort of wondering why you are doing what you're doing, because you don't fit their perception of somebody who works in this industry, what they look like, what they sound like. But for me, all the things that they want to level against me are all the things I'm most proud of. I'm very proud of being a female. I'm very proud of being from South Africa. I'm very proud of my race, of my heritage. These are things that make me who I am, make me unique, and make me see the game differently from many of the other people I work with.
And Rupinder and Simone, for you two, being senior roles in your organisations and, you know, women of ethnic minority heritage, what's it like at that level?
For me, it's not been a problem, and to be honest, I haven't faced any form of discrimination in the football industry. I did in my early days in the legal profession. So I was told at the age of 17 that going into law was a white-dominated and a male-dominated profession, so don't do it. But obviously I persevered. But in my working life, both in my legal career and at the FA, I've not faced anything. But I hope that's because of my skill, but certainly my race, gender has not held me back and has not put any barriers in my way either.
And what about you, Simone?
I'd say similar. I don't feel that I've been held back, but I do feel that I'm, you know, in the minority. I'll go into a meeting or into a conference and there'll be, you know, not very many people who look like me, if any at all. But I think going back to role models and people like Hope Powell and Alex, Scott. I just think it's so important just to be that role model as a person as well, just to go into schools or to go into conferences and to be there and represent, not just for myself, but for people coming through as well. I think seeing is believing.
OK. Well, on that note, we've got lots more coming up. We are going to explore the role of BAME women in the boardroom a bit more and what influence they can have on the men's game.
There's a clear lack of representation of women of colour in the professional game, and I think that there are many things now being done within the game to help redress that balance.
Welcome back to Tackling Racism. Thanks to everyone that's got involved so far. We want more of you to please get in touch with us on Twitter using the hashtag Tackling Racism. We want your views as well as your questions. We'll answer some of them live on Twitter straight after the show. Now let's look at BAME women working in the men's game. Manisha Taylor here is the most senior female Asian coach working in the men's game. She's an academy coach at QPR and has been awarded an MBE for her services to football and diversity in sport.
There's a clear lack of representation of women of colour in the professional game, and I think that there are many things now being done within the game to help redress that balance. So the scheme that I was fortunate to be accepted on is the ECAS, which is run by the Premier League, and that helped to fund my full-time job at the club. There's such a small number of those females who are qualified. So if there's a small pool to begin with, if we're looking at how many are qualified to at least have a B licence to be in a pro club, there's a real lack of visibility. So having people that look like you, I think, is really important, because it certainly helps you to feel a lot more confident. You know, you have someone else to talk to. There are similarities and synergies that you can share, and I think because we don't have that, there might be females who are good and should have an opportunity to apply, who have their B licence, but perhaps feel that they can't because there aren't people that look like them, and I think that that's a problem.
QPR is the club, you know, in the middle of London, where there's a lot of diversity around. And I mean, she came in, she volunteered for 4 to 6 months without being paid. She came to nearly every session and worked hard and deserved her opportunity. I think that she can go wherever she wants in the game. I mean, obviously we know that the barriers are going to be there, but with her fighting spirit and her willingness to learn, she'll have a bright future if she comes across the right people.
Rupinder, for any BAME women that are watching now, wanting to get into the game, follow Manisha's path, what advice can you give them?
I think they've got to first of all determine what level they're looking to go to. Are they looking to play? Are they looking to coach? Where are they looking to go? And most of them start at the county FA levels. Now, we're doing everything we can to make sure county FAs are well armed and equipped now in knowledge and education, how to respond to people from every background, encouragement and bringing them on to play. It's really about being strong enough to take that movement. And I know Manisha just said that one thing holding people back is seeing that there's not anybody that looks like me. But they've got to overcome that. We've all overcome that on this board, and you've got to persevere. If that's what you want to do, go for it, because there are openings.
And how essential is it for visibility to get more BAME women involved in the men's game? Simone?
I think it's crucial. I think it's really important, and equally I think it's really important for women to be working in the women's game as well. We've got a number of initiatives around visibility for coaches to be working with England national squads, ensuring that we have BAME and female coaches who can be around the squads, learning and observing. And within that, we do have 3 BAME women working within the national squads now. So that's something the FA and the PFA have really pushed for, and I think it's really important to have that visibility.
Anita, have you ever thought about perhaps working in the men's game, maybe later down the line coaching, something like that?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I started a PhD in governance of women's football, so I was looking at these precise things, trying to see with the levels of the relationships and the levels of communication along the lines. So yeah, I agree. I think it's important that we have women in women's football, but also women in men's, and vice versa. We have men in women's football, and we treat the football industry like we treat any industry. It's just about opportunities, and those who have the skill set to accomplish the job that's required to get the chance. fundamentally.
But you would be happy to work in the men's game. There's nothing putting you off.
I mean, I think, like we mentioned before, of course, having like-minded people, other women, other BAME women as well is important. But, you know, when I started playing football, I looked at men's football. I played with boys. They were accepting of me when I was younger, and that's how I got into the sport. So we just treat, if men and women can just see each other on the same level and treat each other as just human beings fundamentally, there's no reason that I should feel that I shouldn't be able to work in that space, the same way that lots of men don't feel that they can't work in the women's space either.
Yeah.
It should be, you know, the same for both.
We have Mary Phillip, who was one of the first professional players who played for Fulham in 2000, and she's actually a manager now of a men's side. Not within the pro game, but still, I think it's progress.
QPR are a very good example of not seeing colour or gender. If you are qualified for a job, or if you show the right amount of enthusiasm and stuff. I've spoken to Chris and Manisha, and the policy of that club to be representative of their community and to get the best people, but also people that their community look up to and say, that's part of me there at QPR, I think is exceptional and is a template that all clubs could and should follow.
And we talked a little bit about boardrooms earlier. Rupinder, I want to come to you on this about representation at board level. Now, you are the only female BAME representative sat on the FA board. That is quite some achievement. Now, Sporting Equals research shows that there's only 4% of BAME board members on national governing bodies of sport in the UK. That's at a time when the population is 14% BAME. How do we increase this figure?
It's something we're definitely looking at. Obviously, we've done very well in the gender diversity statistics, and we've got to Sport England's governance code. With BAME, we've got various initiatives now. We're driving people forward. We've had the first ever working group of women coming together to look at what the issues are with BAME women working in football from board level all the way down to the pitch. So these are things that we're taking very seriously. It's very high on our agenda because it's now filtering down to become topics on sub-boards and committees to discuss, and will be on the FA board agenda every single meeting, so we get reported back to. So it's a very dynamic phase in football right now. It's moving. There's things happening all the time at all levels.
Yeah, well, the new WSL board was announced, so it's a board of 5 men and 7 women, but not one is of a BAME background. Why is that?
There is no reason as to why there isn't. It simply is a case of it was set up in a way where we had Premier League clubs represented, people from within the FA in the women's game that were on the board, and then very selectively, you know, the positions were open for other individuals who would be able to carry the needs of that game forward at this particular time. So the positions were open, candidates were open to apply, and I believe there were candidates from a BAME background and otherwise. All were considered. But for what the game requires at this time, those appointments were made.
Do you think more work needs to be done in the WSL, Anita, for more diversity and inclusion at all levels of the game?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's also for individuals to really think about those barriers. You know, there was always a first person to walk through that door to create that change. You know, we talk about the likes of Serena Williams and, you know, Coco now showing up in tennis, and we're going to see the likes of, you know, Alex Scott, who's doing brilliant in punditry. And these people have walked through that door and crossed that barrier, and that's one way to do it. You know, just get there first, believe in yourself, have that conviction. The worst thing that can happen is you knock on 10 doors and they say no, but you keep going, and eventually you're going to have someone that advocates for you and that's going to support and push you forward. So that's the first thing. You know, you have to try first, but it's also about the environment, making it conducive to those people having the opportunity and giving that feeling of a safe space and that they belong here and have the chance. So everyone has to take responsibility, us within our community, but also the industry itself.
And you are head of equalities at the PFA, and again, you're the only female BAME representative. So how do you get those figures up?
Well, we've got a specific programme called On the Board, which looks at increasing BAME representation at board level. From a playing perspective, we've had a number of former players, including Danielle Carter, who have gone on to take the course. I've taken it myself. It's really interesting, and it's just one of the initiatives that we are doing to ensure that we do see much better diversification on boards across the game. And in particular, I think the WSL board, in particular, it was disappointing that there is no BME or women of colour.
Do you think it's, Melissa, a case of the applications not being there from the women from these backgrounds?
I think that's one part of it. Having spoken to managers and stuff that work in the game and, you know, asking them why don't we see it, and they say, well, the first part is we don't actually get many people applying, many women of colour, and that again comes back to the opportunities. They probably don't do it because they put off because they don't feel that there are enough opportunities out there. I would say that the game at the moment is in the most welcoming, open state of mind I've ever known it to be. I honestly, over the past year, it's been staggering to see clubs, media organizations, and just across the board in football realizing, hang on, what the game looks like on the pitch to what it is at every other level of it. Something's wrong, and they're all actively looking to address it. The only thing I don't want to see happen is tokenism. You shouldn't be putting people in positions regardless of where it be, whether it's in a board or in a newsroom, because of the colour of their skin or anything like that, to fill a quota or to get percentages up. There are very, very highly qualified people out there to do jobs, and they just need an opportunity. And if they get opportunities, then more people will start applying because they see the pathway.
And we're going to come on to this more next. We are going to be examining the role of BAME females in the media. Is there enough opportunity?
From a colour perspective, there's been comments, are you related to a player?
I was too black for TV, I was told.
Hi, welcome back to Tackling Racism. For the final part, we're going to focus on the media. Are there enough BAME women working on football in newsrooms?
I've been in the industry for nearly a decade now. I think from a colour perspective, there's been comments, are you related to a player, or is a player a member of your family when you go to a stadium, and why are you here? And definitely as a girl, people presuming that you're someone's wife or girlfriend, or that your dad got you into football, or that who took you to football. Questions that you wouldn't ask a boy who was doing the same job as me, basically.
I was too black for TV, I was told. So I ended up being on radio, doing radio for a couple of years. Went on to work for London 2012 Olympics. Again, I was too black to be on TV, and I was actually told this by a producer. And the shocking part is that it was a black producer that said I was too black for TV. And I think for any person, it will knock your confidence. And I think for me, growing up in the UK, seeing other people doing sports and just being able to talk and do things for something they love, and you can't do it because of your skin colour, was tough.
Simone, I want to come to you first. You were shaking your head while you were watching that. Do those comments shock you?
I'm absolutely flabbergasted. You know, it's beyond comprehension for someone to be told that. It's a disgrace.
You shocked that that happened then? Do you think that it's possible that things like that happen now?
I mean, I grew up with Trevor McDonald and Moira Stewart, and, you know, you'd like to think that there is a place for everybody in TV broadcast. However, we do know, again, that there is a disparity. We have underrepresentation, particularly in newsrooms. I think that if we had greater diversity within newsrooms, then reporting on BAME and people of colour would be very different. So, you know, there's a long way to go.
Melissa, this is your area of expertise. How do we continue to diversify our newsrooms?
I think there's a definite imbalance. Broadcasting seems a lot more open to diversity, to having different backgrounds, kind of voices, different experiences in the mix, and there are some excellent women of colour broadcasters, Reshman, Jules Breach. So I think, you know, when we spoke about examples earlier, I think there are so many women that you can look to on TV working in football and sport in general in this country, which is quite uplifting. It's very different when it comes to the print side, written side of things. I am often the only one or one of very few females, let alone females of colour, going to games or reporting or doing, lengthy interviews with managers for the written format. There is going to be a shake-up of the industry because there's an American company starting off in the UK, and they've taken a lot of the traditional newspaper journalists. They've taken from quite a few of the papers, and so those positions need filling, and it's going to be interesting to see how they fill them, because I think part of the reason it's been difficult for women to break through, and especially women of colour, is because those positions in the newspapers especially have been filled for ages and ages and ages and ages. So there definitely wasn't a pathway there or a way you looked and thought, she's doing it, so I could definitely doing it. There hasn't been that. And you actually find then, when we're speaking about applications earlier, if you weigh up the list of applications a broadcasting house gets as opposed to a written media organization from female candidates, it's obviously heavier weighted in broadcasting because people look and they see so many opportunities to do so.
And just on that point, and what Benny mentioned as well about the difference between dark and light-skinned women, this issue of colorism, Anita, I want to come to you on this. Do you think it's spoken about enough when tackling racism?
No, I don't think it's spoken about enough, but because I think it's something that is becoming more and more apparent as a discussion point now. With popular culture things, you're starting to see overt conversations taking place with regards to this, and it's something we're going to have to continue to talk about and figure out the best way to deal with. But I think it's really tough to say, because I think it's about visibility ultimately. And if we give more opportunities to people also with darker skin complexions in these areas, it might start to tackle and redress some of these racial biases, that steep long in colonial history, steeps long in, general racism. And it's something that goes on generation after generation within our own cultures as well. And it's as a result of history. And it's a very complex issue, isn't it, colorism, that not many people understand, but it's very big in the Asian community as well.
Yeah. It was certainly a stigma when I was younger for people of darker skin to be considered to be not attractive, not a cute child or whatever. That's not so much the case that I come across these days, but I know that it is still there in some communities. And it's difficult because that impacts on the individual and on their own personality and the strength of character, because you're constantly stamped down upon. And it affects your view of meritocracy and whether you are worthy of a position going forward. And it's only, I think, by opening up the recruitment processes, getting into the communities, having role models in place in the media, in sport, etc., will these people who have real talent come forward?
Because we've seen the lights. Oh, no, go on. You want to say
No, and I think media has a responsibility to project the right representation of these women that come around. Like the way you describe women of colour, the way you describe darker women of colour is very important for, young people who listen and watch and read editorials to think, oh, this is representative of me. I'm beautiful, I'm strong, I'm powerful, I'm educated, instead of the old biases that you're used to reading about and seeing.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm afraid we have run out of time. I just want to say thank you so much to our panel, Anita, Melissa, Simone and Rupinder. And next up on Sky Sports News, we're going to have huge transfer news for Arsenal, who are ready to smash their transfer record. But I just want to also remind you that we are going to continue this conversation with a Twitter live broadcast. So please do join us. Use the hashtag Tackling Racism. Thanks so much for joining us. We've got so much more to get involved on social media. Arsenal transfer news coming up on the way right here on Sky Sports News.